every series has those groups of people that the second you see one of them introduced, as there's a drop someone on the floor, there's a level of understanding in the series, if like that, okay, this guy's gonna be cool for a period of time, and then after that, like, fate is probably gonna really hammer them hard. And with Fairy Tale, it's always been the God Slayers. It's very strange. I still remember way back. This is like during the Grand Magic games, and it was like right around when Orga lost, and there was somebody who made like a meme, and it was like Sharia standing there next to like a box that Zankro's corpse was in, and it was like Mashima. I think it was like Mashima throwing Orga into the box, and it was just his treatment of God Slayers. It's always been very strange because when you look at the types of Slayers, because we obviously started out with Dragon Slayers, we got God Slayers, and then we got Devil Slayers. When you look at the total line of events that would lead up to each of these Slayer types, it makes a lot of sense for Dragon Slayers. We know the origin of Dragon Slayers. With Devil Slayers, I would assume that, like, my assumption has always been, this is again an assumption, that with Devil Slayers, it would be more of a human driven thing. It would be like they know of Dragon Slayers, so they want to apply the same concept to to Devil Slaying. God Slayers have always been a really weird concept for me because it's with Devil Slaying, I feel like it'd be much more easy to acquire, and we know that there are methods in the verse to demon alter your body. We know now that black magic as well, once you get deep enough into black magic, it does permanent effects onto your body and dips you into that like level of darkness that will turn you into an artificial kind of pseudo demon. With Godslaying, though, the question is where exactly were the origins of? Because with Dragon Slaying, we know obviously it came from, Irene and Belsarion during the whole Dragon War. And with, the Devil Slaying, like I said, we don't know the exact origins, but I think with Devil Slaying, you're able to kind of look at what would be the events of it. Obviously, like with Zareth just doing his thing, there's at one point was tens of thousands of demons running all muck all over the world and whatnot, over the continents and shit. So it makes sense to me. It's like, oh, well, this thing worked great for getting rid of the dragons. Even if you don't know in depth of what that all led to creating Acnologia, it still is logical in the sense of like this worked for people to get rid of dragons. So what about with the devils and demons? Godslaying, though, would it be something even along those lines? Because with gods in the verse, we know that there are gods. We don't know a lot of them in depth. Like, we have Kronos. You can look at, like, at least in, like, demigods and, like, deities with the battle gods of Yakuma, like Ikusa Tsunagi and Yagdo Rigora. There's still a like an understanding of, like, okay, well, these things exist, but we don't know exactly why people would want to go after them, because outside of Ankh Saram, there doesn't seem to be a lot of problematic existence with the gods. Like dragons, it made sense. They kind of just did whatever they wanted to, and humans just kind of had to live with it. Devils and demons, other than like the ones that just kind of want to chill, like on Galuna Island, they just do, again, more so what they're programmed to do, and they wreak havoc and they kill and destroy, and it was all to get to where they would want to be at a point of fulfilling Zareth's wishes and stuff. So with Godslaying, it's always been, to me, my belief is that Godslaying was more so directly man-made, and it would be almost in a kind of power vacuum mentality. Like if you wanted to make a Slayer type, and you're like, well, there's Dragon Slaying, there's Devil Slaying, what am I going to make? Oh, because you know that there are gods. I would assume if you are that deep into the extensive areas of magic, that you would, to know especially about like lost magic types, that you would be aware of stuff like gods in the verse, or at least know of enough information to be like, okay, I believe that these are real, but I can't do it and prove it myself. And we know that Godslaying does work. We see with Demaria when she's using her God Soul that it pushes her out of her form. You know, that's something that we know is just like, that's a direct counter into how the form is going to work. And that's an important thing too, is we know from the way that it was used against Demaria that the methods and styles of it are going to line up with, okay, this all checks. Like with dragons, we know that magic and whatnot can't affect dragons. Even if you somehow hurt them with, say, like raw physical capability, if it's not done, or like curses, spirit arts, if it's not done with the dragon attribute, it doesn't do permanent damage to their body, and they can heal and regenerate, you know, regrow organs and, you know, whatnot. With devils, it does extra damage. We know that because like Natsu and Gray were still relatively, you know, even after getting that Tartarus boost, Gray should still be relative around Natsu's level, as well as like while they were fighting. It's not like Gray was like showing a complete and total eclipse of what Natsu could do at that point. So you look at again, what the problems for, okay, well, dragons generally difficult to use your powers on them at all. Obviously, if you don't have the dragon attribute, it's not impossible. Like if, say, like you were just somehow disgustingly above, like, you know, just some random dragon, and you just beat it into the ground, and you just had this level of power, and in, you know, some way, shape, or form, you got to, okay, you can beat a random dragon. But it's like the idea is, unless you can get past these points or somehow meet these criteria, you're not going to be able to even damage it. With demons and devils, like their weird powers and whatnot, it's going to be so much more of a what am I dealing with kind of situation. And that's why you have something like you are able to nullify their abilities, and you deal additional damage to them when you hit with their with your attacks. With Godslaying, though, we know, at least from Chronos, that touching a god as a mortal is bad. It will hurt you, it will cause damage, assumingly it's like whatever their you know, god dominance and level of just kind of, you know, whatever their, like, what they reside over, what is the thing that they are a god of. We saw, you know, like I said, with Chronos, you know, touching Damari in that form hurt Wendy's hand, and, you know, did this horrible pain drawback, you know, seemingly as it would be the same as like how she does stuff like Age Scratch, where she's like, you know, blasting you with time that like pulls pain and misery out of your body. So with something like Godslaying, leveling and meeting these criteria, it makes sense that it's not just, oh yeah, I have a thing that just is more powerful than like a dragon slaying magic of the same relative level of person. Because it's not like Zenkro, like a good example, or like Wendy and that's another thing I'll get to. Wendy and Sharia, as well as Laxus and Orga. These are important because Wendy and Sharia were relatively about the same level. It seemed like Sherry had a little bit of a raw power edge, where Wendy had more of a combat smarts and technique kind of thing going on more. Because obviously she had like her buffs and stuff. She had more in the way that she was going to apply her combat skills and what she's acquired. And I would assume, because we know about Sherry, as she went to like Magic Academy, she went to school, excelled in all that, got a book from Grand Doma, even though he didn't think that she was going to be able to learn Godslaying magic from it, but she was able to anyway. It's like, okay, well, you look at this character, say that you have two characters who are relatively around the same level, and it's not like Wendy couldn't damage Sharia, and vice versa. Same thing with Laxus and Orga. It's very clear after we saw, you know, you see like Orga versus Jura and then Laxus versus Jura. It's clear that Laxus wasn't putting in the same level of effort when he was fighting Orga, and it's clear that he was much stronger than Orga, really, when it came down to it. And on top of that, you look at just the display of him, it's not like Laxus was just getting hit by stuff and then like shrugging off. Even when they were doing like little power flexes, it was clear that Laxus was stronger. But the Black Lightning was still able to damage Laxus, even if it wasn't like anything like crazy considerable. And then with Natsu is a little bit of the opposite, where it was like Zenkro is a little bit stronger than him, but it wasn't like Zenkro was like immeasurably more powerful than Natsu, that he couldn't keep up or he couldn't do anything. It seemed more so that he just, a direct my power versus your power, that Godslaying is going to, you know, to win when these characters are on level. And again, that's important because in, say, like Natsu versus Zenkro was able to get the edge on him. With Wendy and Sharia, they were around level. They were able to do damage to each other. Laxus versus Orga, Laxus is clearly stronger, but the God Slaying Lightning still is able to damage Laxus. And to me, it's always been that God Slaying is it's more so like if you think of Dragon Slaying in where it is you're doing specifically, it's like, okay, it's a magic made to intercept and fight dragons. Devil Slayers, I think with Devil Slayers, the fact that instead of like with Dragon Slaying, it's like, okay, I need the dragon attribute to get past one, the magic kind of just nulling ability that they have, and the fact that if you don't have the dragon attribute, any damage you do to them is not going to really last. But with Devil Slaying, it makes sense that the extra damage, it's like instead of, oh yeah, I have to do like more of a direct workaround, like a built-in problem, it's more of you're just trying to hammer out the issue. You're trying to squash and eradicate the demons and devils. And again, that makes sense of like, it's, you know, somebody who hunts demons versus hunts dragons. You're going to run into way more demons. It's going to be way more of a problem in terms of numbers. And obviously not way back when there was tens of thousands of dragons and stuff all over the world, but I'm talking about in context of when events were happening. Because like when dragon slaying magic was invented to aid the war, devil slaying, I would assume, was more so made to go, you know, fight, you know, give humans a chance against demons and devils in general. Whereas god slaying, I've always viewed god slaying more so as you are, again, it's like a power fantasy thing. I'm trying to make sure this like thing didn't get unplugged. You're trying to more so imitate. You're trying to emulate what you want to be more so. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if God Slayers, like, there was no god that taught it to a human. Because Hades, assumingly so, had a book similar to Sharian, probably what happened with Orga. And when you think about that, because we know that Hades is the one that raised and did all the stuff with the members of Grimoire Heart. We know Zenkro, and he's the one that said that he learned it from Hades. I don't think Hades knew it exactly himself, but would have a book and knowledge to do so, because we know that he had knowledge on the Arc of Time when he was talking to Ultir. And Ultir was literally in their giant mega library setup, so it makes sense of, like, they would have all these different lost magic books. And why that's important, because, like, you could say with Orga, maybe Orga just happened to have the money to get one. Maybe he was lucky enough to get one. Maybe, you know, it's something in the, like, where his, you know, where he comes from, that they had possession of like a book that like went back to it. Because I think if you look at the fact that Sharia got it from a book, and most likely Zenkro got it from some form of book, or Hades got it from a book and then, you know, taught it to Zenkro the best he could. Because like with Hades, I would assume that he would only need to know like pretty much the basics, teach as Zenkro, and then let him go from there. But if you think about the idea again, because one is for sure from learn from a book, Hades and Zenkro, I feel like it just makes sense that there was a book involved. And then same thing with Orga. It makes me believe that with the humans, they had, again, the method. They developed a method for god slaying, but they didn't do it the same way that any, like, again, with dragon slayers rather, and devil slayers. Again, we don't know devil slaying's origin exactly, but I would assume, just based off what we know, there's, you know, it could be like there was a devil that taught it to him, but I would assume it was more so created by humans specifically for the purpose of it. And I know, like, Irene, she invented dragon slaying magic, but she also, like, was directly with these dragons, and they're a little bit more so of cooperation involved. But god slaying, and this is another thing that I think is important about it, because if it's more so the idea of like a human wanting to become a god rather than like a god being involved in teaching it and creating it to them, it would make sense of why we don't have something like God Force. And then Devil Force isn't like a name specifically canon. I know people refer to it as that, but it's the same idea. It's like Dragon Force. You are temporarily using the power to jump ahead in the progression of dragonification, turn yourself much more dragon-like, gain a huge stat increase across the board, new abilities can be unlocked and whatnot. And seemingly the same thing with Devil Slaying. God Slayers, so it's like we've had 3 for 3 of God Slayers, and Orga, Orga is the one that was like hoed the most, because like we know relatively nothing about him in terms of his backstory, and relatively almost anything within the verse. But I would assume that he is a level of prodigy as well, just from the fact, again, we know that the Sabretooth got to where it was when Fairytale was gone because of the, recruitment of pretty exceptional wizards. There was just a handful of them, in addition to, Minerva being conditioned into getting to that crazy powerful state to where she was. But with the three of them, it's like, okay, well, if you have these three prodigies, how is it that none of them got to a point of, like, again, equivalent of Dragon Force? And it, because devil slayers, with what we saw with Gray, there is a degree of it, the whole black creeping arm stuff going on with him. So what's up with god slaying? And I believe there's always been that, again, my belief is that if once we get the explanation, if ever, about it, it would really kind of click and light up. But it would make sense to me if god slaying is more so like a human created thing purely from wanting power, because it all checks out with humanity. It checks out with, like, the idea of some human probably developing this to become a god. Plus the magic itself, I think it would make sense that there's, like, some form of darker aspect to it, with the fact that god elements are black, and we know that the black magic specifically, like, once you delve further into it, there is a much more malefic and evil aspect that is played into like the elements and in your magic itself. And, like, Gray recently, like, for example, developed the whole black ice when he invented a new type of devil slaying, because and we only have ice devil slaying, but we know that, and I would assume that anime is right on this one. I know the 100 Years Quest anime didn't keep up with it, but I feel like the kind of purplish color is the most, it, like, makes the most sense, at least from what we see, and especially with, like, some of, like, the color auras and stuff. But if a devil attribute is not, as you would expect, like, Gray gets this black creeping energy and the aura skin thing going on, you would expect that the devil elements would be black, but no, the god elements are black. So that might also play into the idea that the gods themselves are more wicked, and we know, obviously, on Saram, Kronos, we didn't really get too much of, like, him by himself, but I would assume, just based off of, probably a level of evil that is, maybe not evil, but, like, dangerous enough of a problem that humans had to try and work around them, because maybe that's it as well. It's like, instead of, like, a human being like, I'm just gonna invent my own, maybe that it's just there were a couple gods that were so problematic that they ended up creating god slayer magic. And I've always wondered, like, maybe, like, did god slaying magic come first? Because maybe before dragons there were more gods, and that's why, god slayers maybe led to less humans in the verse, or sorry, less humans in the verse, less gods in the verse. That's why there's so few, similar to what happened to the dragons. And it's also, it makes sense to me that there would be this slayer type magic created in a direct response to a problem. It's dragon slaying magic was made for fighting dragons during the war. Devils and demons, and it makes sense that from the whole, like, big surge of demons and devils that Zareth made, that devil slaying was invented. So with god slaying, again, there's origins of it we don't know, but at the same time, there's enough that that we can piece things together and get a good estimation of what exactly is going on with it. So, to me, I think that god slaying it's one of those powers in the verse that it's really neat in like, just general conception. I mean, you're getting black elements, bad at, like, it's very hard to, like, make a power and then just slap the color black on it and then it not look cool. But with, like, say, like, Zenkro, we saw, like, a really strong first display. We saw, Sharia and, Orgi in smaller amounts, but it's not like god slaying is in and of itself weak, and in and of itself, like, not as capable as the other slayer types. But it feels to me more of a, almost like you're kind of doping yourself. Like, it's like a steroid set. Like, kind of like, think about it like this. Second generation dragon slayers have quicker and easier access to Dragon Force, but it seems like I guess third too as well. I always gotta like preface that, but it's like, okay, with the Lacrima there is a faster way to achieve Dragon Force, but it doesn't even come out remotely as close in terms of the boost you get from either getting Dragon Force of consuming your attribute or an energy source that forces like the transformation, or getting to the point where you naturally can do it and you're strong enough to achieve this power yourself. So similar, it's like is a faster way of raw power with Godslaying, and in the process of it, you don't get other traits. Like maybe there isn't a God's Force, maybe you can't adapt to other versions of your element, and there just doesn't seem to be as many direct options. But instead, it's just funnels into like power and physical strength and a level of domination over the other elements that you run into. Oh, sorry, other variants of the element you use that you run into. So I don't know. I would love to eventually get a next gen series because I feel like Godslayer, like a Godslayer, would be really easy to have as like a powerful enemy. But I don't know. I feel like right now, unless we have something like one of the Urasion Sex is a Godslayer, or one of Fire and Flame is a Godslayer. Unless it's like a very specific person, I just don't see a Godslayer showing up and having a level of presence and not even just a level of presence, but like a level of direct value in the verse. Like, oh wow, we're finally gonna get like this bits of lore, this bits of information on Godslaying. It would feel like to me just now if we got a character that had it and started to explain it, it would be more so like pretty much just to explain it at this point, rather than if we got to say like a next gen, a character is a Godslayer, and this character's like, oh, I'm gonna be what introduces information on this magic type finally, because it's gonna be relevant for this character to be frequent in the verse. So I wish I could have talked more about the details of Godslaying, because but at the same time it's like there's not a lot that we really have. Like the direct Slayer stuff we know from any of the other Slayer types, they haven't generally one attribute, they eat their attribute. There's clearly like a doesn't matter if you are strong, like if you're fighting a stronger person, if that's also a Slayer, there's a damage level that still applies. Again, Laxus versus Orga, it's very clear that Laxus was stronger than Orga, but Orga was still able to hurt him. So I would love to figure out more information about it. I would love to see something come up that really kind of delves into a little bit more, but I don't have my hopes up for right now. At the moment, I mean, it's been a floating existence of like lore, really, in the verse of like what happened to create Godslayers. Was there a problem with gods in the past? Was it something that we're ever gonna really get to? Maybe with Ankh Saram, if we ever get to Ankh Saram, maybe he'll have his own like force of Godslayers. Maybe it'd be like something like that, like gods created Godslayers that essentially have like their own like trained emissaries. Because you could also do it like this. Maybe it was under a different name. Like before Godslayer, it had a different kind of style where it was like, divine avatar or something, where it's like a god would pick out like a couple people, train them to have a fraction of their power, and they would be able to, for worshiping them enough, you're able to wield a piece of power gifted by this god that teaches you. And that's how like they came to be more so as like soldiers for these gods, but then later swapped and then was renamed Godslayer after it was like, okay, well, they're not they're not emissaries of these gods anymore. Now they're their bane of their existence, they're destroyers. So I'd love to hear what else you guys if there's any things that I didn't talk about that you have general questions. I'll answer any questions that I can in the comments, as well as what else would you guys like to hear about. I did this one after I want to make sure I get his name right. The guy in the comments, Lickley Leo, he brought it up because I was thinking about like I might talk about a different dragon slaying attribute today, or generation today. And I was like, you know what, I could do a Godslayer video, because again, it's like there's not a lot to Godslayers in total, but it's still a really interesting topic, because in the verse it's again, it's mysterious. It's something that we don't have like a lot of details on, but they like just like from the fact that, okay, well, I can form up an idea of what happened based off of what we know. And I think that is fun in of itself, even if it's like I wish we did know. So we'll see. Maybe in the future, Mashima will be like, you know, it'd be perfect to bring into next gen and actually have relevant finally as like a long going character. Bam, Godslayer. Like maybe Laxus's son in the future will get a lightning Godslayer, and it won't be Orga. Orga will just imagine like Orga. He's sitting there. He sees this kid who has the same magic as him, and it's the son of a guy that beat his ass like in front of the beat the guy that beat his ass, and he just like, this kid's already better than me. He's already better than me. He's been on screen already in like 4 chapters. That's like the more than I've gotten in the last 10 years. Something like that. He'd be like, well, at least I have my music. But other than that, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say on it. I'd love to hear what you guys have to kind of give an input and tell me what the kind of video you'd like to hear next. I'm trying to do more. Like, I want to do more. I plan on doing more stuff on just current events, but I want to do more on just general talking videos and just go into stuff that is like, hey, let's talk about this topic today, or let's talk about this character today. I'm planning on doing one on molding magic, maker magic in general. I want to talk about some of the like limitations and ideas of it. Like, somebody reminded me the other day. I completely forgot. If you made it to the end of this video, this will be something just as an extra. I was talking to a guy who was like, hey, is there Thunder Make in the series? And I was like, I don't think so. I can't remember it. There's one chick at the start of Laxus's spinoff. I don't even think she uses 2. I think she just uses 1 Thunder Make spell. And that's it. Technically, it doesn't really matter because it's molding magic. It pretty much has infinite possibilities of that attribute. But it's like, I completely forgot about this chick. It's like, I remember reading the chapter and I was like, oh, we got a new person, like we got a new Thunder Make person, or we got a new person that has Thunder Make, like a new Make wizard. Awesome. And then like the next chapter, it's like she's just like, okay, I'm gonna do more bonus support stuff. And then right when Laxus was getting serious, this chick's lost. But anyway, yeah, comment below, tell me your thoughts are, and I'd love you guys in the next one.